Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Iskia. I'm the facilities coordinator for the Redmond Reactor Space. Before we start, I have a few things I'd like to go over. Uh, Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. We'll share useful links throughout the chat, and the session will be recorded and it's going to be available on demand in about 24 to 48 hours on our Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. And that brings us to today's session. It's going to run approximately for 30 minutes, and we will have time for questions throughout, which brings us to our speakers for today. I'll bring them on stage, and I will turn things over and let them have at it.
Okay, thank you, Saskia. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm super excited to be here with you. This is like the very last episode of this amazing series. I'm super happy to have also our amazing guest speakers for today's live stream. And before I introduce you to them, in this episode, we will explore the data and artificial intelligence AI trends for the next uh, 2024 and how we can prepare ourselves. So, welcome, Jasmine. Welcome, Bea. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. This is like the Christmas show, right?
Kind of, almost. Yippee. So, Jasmine, Bea, would you like to introduce a little bit about what you do and even in like a hobby so people can get to know more about yourselves?
Sure, I'll go first. So I am a cloud advocate here at Microsoft. I specifically focus on AI and specifically with data. Yeah, that's what I do. And I guess a hobby for me lately, I've been taking piano lessons. So I used to play when I was younger, so it's been nice to revisit that. So I've been practicing a lot.
That's so awesome. What about you, Bea?
Well, I'm also a cloud advocate here at Microsoft, and I specialize in AI. And as far as hobbies go, I'm totally addicted to travel. So I travel every chance I get.
That's so awesome. I also like to travel a lot. Yeah. I,
Great.
yeah. So let's get started. I'll start with this question. What are some of the current trends in data and AI that you find the most interesting or impactful, and how do they differ from the previous years? This question we will start with Jasmine.
Sure. Thanks, Abril. So I think one thing that I find really interesting nowadays is how much we're able to automate through AI common data tasks, things like cleaning, things like not classification, specifically standardization, things like that. So for example, I've been really having a lot of fun in Microsoft Fabric's Copilot, trying to ask things of my data and as well as kind of make sense of it and organize it in a way that makes sense to me. So I think that's really cool, a really cool development nowadays. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes.
Me too.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. Sorry, continue, Ben.
I was going to say I completely agree with that, and I think that one of the things that has enabled that was the kind of the popularity of the RAG pattern, or retrieval augmented generation, which is a pattern that actually has been around for a while, I think since 2021, but it really only became a thing in the last year or so. And what that pattern has enabled is for people to add their own data to foundation models in a much easier way than what we could do before. Before we had to fine tune the models, which is expensive for large models, and now we can do it so much easier. And I think that has enabled kind of so many people to start using these models for specific tasks and for their own data. And I think that has been amazing to see.
It is like all of these current um, projects and the things that have been coming up is like so amazing. And it's like, wow, I can only imagine about the things that are coming up next year. So let's continue with the other question. So, Bea, what are your predicts or expectations from 2024 in terms of data and AI? And what are some of the factors or drivers that will influence the future direction of the field?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I see 2024 as like the year when we start seeing a lot of different modes of communication used in LLMs, not just language. 2023, I think, was the year of the language. And I think we're already starting to see models that take in language and images and produce language, or that take language, produce images, or that take in text, produce video, or that take in a video and produce a summarization of that video, or so, I think we're going to start seeing more of that. I feel like we're still in the very beginning of that, and so I certainly expect both research and products to catch up on that in 2024. The other thing that I kind of starting to see that I think will also be a trend is agents. So agents are basically another pattern, really, that where we tell the LLM a specific goal that we want it to accomplish, and the LLM is able to break up the goal into tasks, and then it's able to execute on those tasks. So it's basically able to think a little bit on its own. And we started seeing, that a little bit in 2023. You may have heard of it with other names like planners or assistants. But I still think that we're at the very beginning of that. And I think that 2024 will be the year where we'll actually see those coming into more products and grow in popularity. What do you think, Jasmine?
Yeah, I love that, B. And I think that in addition to that, we're going to find that a lot more people are going to be really digging into the weeds of what is beneficial for them. So like I was mentioning, things like, like these co-pilots that are helping us make a lot more sense of our data. I think we'll be seeing folks reading a lot more docs, reading a lot more content about how to leverage them. So much has come out in the past year. I think that now we're all kind of asking, okay, where can I apply this as business value? And I know this kind of speaks to all of AI in general, but when it comes to specifically data, I think it's going to be really important as we are trying to make sense of it at a faster pace.
So it's totally awesome. Thank you, Bea and Jasmine, for sharing. So, going back with Jasmine, what are some of the emerging technological advancements that you are the most excited about or curious? And how do they address the current challenges or limitations of data in AI?
Oh, wow. So I think some of the advancements that I think are really, at least one that I find is really interesting and also really important, is this dedication to responsible AI. When you're thinking about data, it really all starts with data, specifically things around data governance, security, who was accessing what. I was just actually watching the news and essentially heard about a particular situation where somebody who was managing a data center had access to all the data within the data center. So they were just maintaining this physical space, but they didn't really need access to it. So I think things like that are going to really help us, be able to protect the data that we're feeding into these models, because that's really, that's the end goal for a lot of these large sets of data. So that's kind of where I see things going. Just really being very granular about what we're doing with this data and how we're applying it and how we're using it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually think that if we don't get that right, we just don't have AI. We just can't move forward with AI. So I'm glad that so many people and so many companies are putting so much effort into that, and just so that we can get it right and actually help people right from the beginning. I also think there's a couple of areas that I'm really excited about, and one of them is medicine. And the other one is education. So those are the two ones that I kind of keep watching on the news. And medicine, because I'm really optimistic that AI will help us find medications and cures for diseases that we don't have today. And we're seeing a lot of progress in that area. And in terms of education, I think the thing that's going to change the most is that, I feel like today we're in this world where, depending on where you're born in the world, you have access to a certain level of education. You're kind of stuck with that. And I think that with AI, I think that's going to change. I think that I think people wherever you are in the world, people are going to have access to the same high quality of education and resources, and will be able to achieve their potential even more. And just like an interesting example of that is just seeing, for example, Duolingo. Like, I feel like they're doing such amazing work and like enabling people to learn a different language wherever you are in the world. It used to be that you had to pay a teacher or a professor a lot of money to be able to learn a language, and how do you, in certain countries you may not even get somebody who speaks the language you want to learn, or at least that speaks it very well. And I feel like that has been in some ways kind of eliminated by Duolingo, and it's kind of making education more equitable. And this is just one example. And I think Khan Academy is another one. And I feel like we're going to start seeing more and more of those popping up.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of the things that you have been mentioning. You both actually, especially now in terms of education. Now with all of this, is like it's making things more accessible, and I truly love this. So before we jump into the questions in the chat, so Beatrice, what are some of the recommendations or resources that you can share with us to stay updated and informed about the latest developments and innovations in data and AI?
Well, Microsoft has this new Azure AI Discord channel that I highly recommend people join. We have a ton of people from the product teams and also from advocacy just lurking around and kind of trying to help people with their questions. So if you're using Microsoft products in the AI space, highly recommend that you join and ask your questions there.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I know a lot of you out there are probably still like trying to understand and make sense of generative AI. So I highly recommend you check out the Generative AI for Beginners repository or curricula, and learn kind of everything from what it is to how to leverage it in your daily lives.
Sounds awesome. And actually, there's one question in the chat. Alba's asking, could you please share the Discord link? I don't know if we have
Let's
it here.
see if I can. I don't have it. I think if you go to the Discord app, let's just log into your Discord and search for Azure AI, and you'll find it within the app.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue with another question that we have. So Jasmine, what are some of the challenges or opportunities that you anticipate of or foresee on 2024 horizon in the field of data and AI, and how can we prepare to ourselves to adapt to them?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is a good question and something I've kind of been thinking over. I think that we're seeing data be collected and stored at like this, essentially an alarming rate. I think there is a number out there, a figure out there that says that all the data in the world will reach like, I think 24 zettabytes or something like that. It's either way, it's a lie. It's gonna take many, many years to like download that on like the world's fastest internet. And so I think on that case, I think a lot of people who are, wanting to use their data in conjunction with generative AI, such as, using that RAG system or model for, kind of combining generative AI and data that they're bringing, or even, things like assistants and things like that. They're probably going to be thinking about, okay, now I have all this data. How do I manage all of it? How do I store it? Especially when you're thinking of other ways that AI generates data for us, right? Or we need additional sets of data to manage AI. So for example, things like vectors, vector databases and things like that. So I think a big challenge for folks is going to be like storage and how to manage that. I think I expect to see a lot more people using things like cold storage that doesn't necessarily need to be accessed immediately, but essentially thinking about ways to make it more cost effective. So I think to answer your second question about how we can prepare ourselves, I think now's a great time to really fill in some gaps about data that you may not be fully familiar with. So I know my background is software development, and so my understanding of data initially came from that, that software development, background. So one thing that I want to fill gaps in for myself is essentially things like database optimization, making things run faster, making things perform better. So that's where I see things going.
Yeah, I think that in my mind, I think the biggest challenge that we have ahead of us is the use of AI to create misinformation. That's something that actually kind of scares me a little. I feel like there's already so much misinformation without AI. I feel like if you add AI to it, things could get worse. And so that is something that I think we're going to have to be very careful about moving forward and kind of try to find ways around it.
Okie dokie. Sounds awesome. Okay, so we have some questions here in the chat. So all boys asking us, what services do you think we will use the most during 2024?
Well, I can go first on that one. So I think that OpenAI service is going to continue being a very hot topic. It was the year of the OpenAI service in 2023. I think it will continue in 2024. I also think that search, Azure vector databases, as Jasmine was saying, and so using our search service, Azure Search, will also continue to be a very hot topic, and specifically in the context of vector databases and retrieval augmented generation. So I think at least from the Azure stack, I would say those two are the ones that I'm really excited about right now.
Yeah, I actually also agree as well. And again, speaking to my point on data management, I think things that tools around or services around data engineering. So specifically, one that I personally love is Azure Data Factory. Being able to to move your data from one place to another, move it into a different format. So, for example, one example is the Azure OpenAI service. When you're fine tuning a model, requires you to have a format in JSON. And so how do you go from, a relational format, in a particular database, or even a CSV file into JSON? So, and how do you automate that? So I think services like that are going to be quite important for folks who are looking to leverage AI.
Awesome. Yeah, especially that one, I think it will be definitely useful for a lot of people in 2024. And we have another question from Alba. Ben, Jasmine, how did you learn AI?
You want to go first, B?
Okay, I can go first. So I actually, for me, it was kind of maybe a not very common path. There are more common and a little bit easier paths that we can talk about next. But for me, I was a software engineer, and I just started becoming obsessed with AI and started spending all my nights and weekends learning about it and doing projects on my own. And my husband has went to grad school in math, so I was pulling his books and reading them and understanding everything. And it got to a point where I was just so obsessed with that I actually decided to apply to grad school and do that full time. So I actually quit my job as a software engineer, went to the University of Washington in the applied math department, and I essentially dedicated myself 100% to AI for a little while. And so that's the hard way. And it's certainly not necessary, in today's world when there's just so much demand for people doing AI, and there's also demand not just for, there's demand for all levels and also all intersections of areas. I think actually it's super useful to be, just enough AI that you can make, I don't know, your other area useful, let's say biology and AI or databases and AI, right? So I certainly don't think that this is necessary for everybody to do. You certainly don't need to quit your job. But I do think that it requires some effort, right? And it requires being interested in it, and requires, putting kind of the work into reading about it and kind of doing a little bit of work on the side, especially if your job doesn't align with AI today. Now, I think the good news is that I think that more and more jobs are going to start aligning with AI, whether you want them or not. And so I think that people are going to just kind of be pushed in this direction and given the opportunity to ramp up in these areas at work. So yeah. How about you, Jasmine? How did you get into this?
Yeah, that's a really cool story, V. I didn't realize like you were a software engineer too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my position in cloud advocacy has really given me the opportunity to really learn AI. I think for me, one of my favorite things to do as a cloud advocate is to make demos. And so I started there. I think I was trying to make an app. This is for, I think, a set of students, and I was trying to make an app that like let people vote with cats versus dogs. But in order to vote, they had to upload like an image of a cat or dog. And so I had like a AI service in the background. I think it was custom vision to essentially kind of classify these two images as a cat or dog. And then it kind of like took off from there. So it really, for me, when I'm learning anything new, I have to read the docs. I have to learn the docs. I have to understand how things work. And then especially when, especially for me also as a cloud advocate, when I have to speak and teach other people how to leverage it, I also have to equip myself with the knowledge that, to be, get ahead of any questions that might come my way. So yeah, so I think to just wrap this up, like, yeah, I got pretty lucky, but I would say if I were somebody today, like not in developer relations or in cloud advocacy, I think I would just try stuff out, just poke stuff around. I think things like the Azure AI Studio makes it super, super easy for you. You kind of essentially have this like UI to like try and like tweak and play around with things here and there. And I don't think that you necessarily have to sit down and read a paper. I think it helps you and enhances your knowledge. But I think just like playing around with it is a really great way to break the ice.
I totally agree. And I actually want to highlight something that Jasmine said that I think is really right on, which is like when you're trying to teach somebody else something that you're excited about, that, at least to me, gives me so much more motivation to learn it and to be more thorough when learning it. So I really think that, I don't know, like if you have kids, just think about like, how do I get my kids into AI? And then you go learn it yourself with the mindset of like, oh, I'm going to get my kid into it. And then maybe you'll get kind of like the motivation there, right?
Yeah, I think it's like really awesome tips that you have shared actually, and it's actually related to the other question that we have in chat, that how can I get started in AI? Alba mentions that she's interested in the area but doesn't know how to start. I think that you have shared like a lot of tips, but I don't know if there's something else that you would like to share with her.
I think one thing that I've been trying to tell everybody when I'm like doing sessions or like talks on AI is it's like I just try to level people. I understand it's overwhelming. It's a lot of information to take in, but remember, just like, one step at a time, like that's how we learn how to code. That's how we learn how to do anything, is one step at a time. Just focus on, like the immediate path you're trying to get to, and don't focus on the journey, or focus on the journey, not the end destination or the end goal.
There is no end goal. I'll say that right now. Like there's always more to learn, right? So yes. As long as you're making progress in the right direction, you're amazing. You're doing great, right? And I also think that actually the resource that Jasmine shared earlier is actually a great place to start for complete beginners, the Generative AI for Beginners repo that I think the link was shared earlier. So if you're a complete beginner, I think just start there.
Yeah, I totally agree. This repository is like super friendly, and it's like really totally guides you. If you're like a new beginner into this AI world, it will definitely help you. And so actually now we have another question from Tim. He's asking us, how would you suggest a total newbie become an expert in AI?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the things that we've talked about, like start with a for beginners of some kind, which could be our Generative AI for Beginners, or anything else you find on the internet that takes you from the beginning to like some knowledge. And then I think from there, I think the best way is really to think of something you want to create and then just start playing, right? Because that's really when the learning is going to start happening, is when you start kind of tweaking with the code, just creating something on your own, and then you have to answer your own questions, and then you go on the internet and you search, and then you iterate, right? So that's, but of course, like to get there, I feel like you need to have some basics so that you know like what ideas to explore. So
yeah, I 100% agree. And I think one thing, the question about like how do I go from beginner to expert, I think expert means different things to a lot of people. And what does expert look like to you? Like and when you think of an AI expert, who does, like, who comes to mind? What are they doing in the space? That's one way to essentially really, like, kind of think about, like, define what expert means to you. And remember that these experts, they all had to start somewhere, right? They all had to start with that line of code or that journal that thing, or journal, that paper that they wrote or read. So I think that's really like leveling and setting the goal of like what expert looks like to you. I think it's also a really great start as well.
Yeah, I definitely totally agree with this, especially because most of the times, like, things are constantly evolving. So you will need to, if you want to become an expert at something within months, it can definitely change, or new things can come up. So you will have to become an expert in that or thing that just came up. So it's like, I think, in my personal opinion, it's like you have to continuously learning, just like we have been mentioning during this live stream. So yeah. So moving forward with another question that here is in the chat. Hmm, Generally, what are the database engines for AI, and what are the advantages of the main players?
So I can take this. I mean, like we've mentioned before, a lot of things have been coming out, and I think one thing to definitely check out is vector databases. There are some couple offerings in Azure. I think one that's coming to mind is Cosmos DB. Another thing about storing things like weights for particular for like classifying particular like phrases, or maybe particular things in when you're trying to be help. I might need a little help here. I'm not a full AI expert, but I guess I'll just share that one example that I saw was this really cool Azure sample on Azure where somebody was making a session recommender. So essentially, you go to a conference and enter in these conference sessions, and based on the session title and the description, it would give it a score, and that essentially that score it would just be like a numerical, so like a numerical representation of like its proximity to these other sessions. So when I go in and search for a particular topic, and I'll see a bunch of sessions that are related to that topic. So for example, Blazor is a really popular component of the .NET or .NET 6 and above, right? And so it's really popular amongst .NET developers, so C# developers. So if I was looking for all the sessions on C#, Blazor might show up there. And so the way that's represented is not only is the title and descriptions saved in there, but also is the score. And so the way that this demo was set up is that these scores were saved right in Azure SQL database, right? And then essentially using Azure OpenAI to essentially create those scores and pull up those particular related sessions. So all of to say is that I think any database or any database or data store is going to still be in play, but I think things like vector databases we're going to see a lot more advancements there because of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. So since we're running out of time, just the last question that I will ask here, because we're running out of time. I'm sorry. I'm sure that if you have more questions, you can totally reach out to Jasmine and Bea. They have their social media right there and there. So you can ask them directly. And I don't know if you have like any AI project or neuroscience, if you have the link or anything, you've heard anything, if you can share it. Just one, because there's one person in the chat that's asking. So I don't know.
I don't have anything in mind. I know there's a lot going on in that space, and there's actually a professor at University of Washington here in Seattle that actually teaches both classes because there's just so much overlap, and so he teaches AI from the perspective of neuroscience, and then he teaches neuroscience with a little bit of AI. So I heard that those classes are particularly good if you kind of interested in the intersection. And by the way, they're all online, so you don't need to like pay to take the class. You can watch the lessons online. So maybe something to dig into. But I'm not aware of like any specific project or anything like that. Are you, Jasmine? Do you know anything that you could recommend?
No, nothing's coming to mind at the moment, but I think one thing might be to just check out GitHub. Look at the tags on GitHub, see, what's tagged AI. I think it might be a great start. AI, data science, machine learning, kind of seeing what folks are doing in that space.
That's awesome. Those are like really great tips. So thank you so much, Jasmine and Bea. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge here today. Thanks so much to the audience. I hope you have had like a great time. Please remember that you can see all these sessions on Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel, and you can follow Jasmine and Bea on their social media. They are really awesome. They share a lot of great stuff. So thank you all.
Thank you, April. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
And everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.